We welcome our next guest. That's Alisia Painter, the co-founder and COO of Botanix Labs, is here to help us discuss what's going on here. You know, we have to draw a line in the sand somewhere. So with some people, that's going to be the highs, and they're going to say, oh, it's had this drawdown. Others are going to talk year to date. I went back to the day before the election. Bitcoin is up 14% since that point still. You cannot say the same about the S&P 500. It's down 11%. Why do you think it's been able to outperform going back over the last few months, Alisia?
That's a great question. I think at Botanix, we've seen that Bitcoin has remained stable and even outperformed traditional equities as well as every major digital asset over the past few months. And if you look at the reasons for that, it's because Bitcoin has really established itself as a safe haven asset compared to the US dollar. So if you look at the impact of tariffs over the past week, Bitcoin has actually outperformed both in terms of price action as well as realized volatility compared to any other asset class. And it really establishes itself as that safe haven in comparison.
So is there any, I'm curious your thoughts on that, because right now we're all looking for, I think, the safe haven and this volatility. And so with this name's exposure to some of these names that are seen as like proxies for it, obviously that have a decent amount of holdings, and like a strategy, for example, or some of these various entities, do you think then there's a risk of that, or you still maintain that this is definitely a risk-off asset here?
I think the fact that realized volatility of Bitcoin has actually been better than NASDAQ and that equities means that there's long-term bullish sentiment, both with strategy as well as other corporations that are venturing into corporate Bitcoin treasury. So that is an industry-wide trend, and that is why you're seeing this long-term bullish sentiment. If you look at just the price action over the past week, I think Bitcoin is down around 7 or 8%, whereas the rest of the market is down considerably more. And that's because a lot more traders, institutional, as well as retail, are holding on to their Bitcoin. And I think that is symptomatic of Bitcoin's status as this almost reserve digital asset and positioning itself as a digital gold and as the foundation of a new global financial ecosystem.
Yeah, and let's expand on that, Alisia, a little bit, because this is where my question was going to go. You know, this whole talk of de-dollarization, I always think is a little bit overzealous. This idea of a BRICS currency seems to come up every 5 or so years, and then it doesn't really catch on. That said, with the ramping up of geopolitical rhetoric, particularly around trade at the moment with tariffs, if the countries were looking for somewhere else to settle transactions or means of currency transaction, perhaps a Bitcoin. If I was a Bitcoin bull, I would be positioning this asset as that. Do you feel there is a kind of a proving point that needs to happen here for Bitcoin, or is this just an opportunity for more widespread adoption?
I think it's both. I think it's an opportunity for widespread adoption, and the ETFs really heralded that. They were able to de-risk and legitimize Bitcoin and really help it transcend, legal, regulatory, institutional, as well as cultural hurdles to mainstream adoption. But the next wave of Bitcoin's adoption and growth is actually going to come from increased utility. So imagine Bitcoin as a unit of currency, being able to trade with Bitcoin, lend, borrow against your Bitcoin, earn yield on that Bitcoin. That's really going to help move that forward, and that's what we're doing at Botanix, is really building that platform for a Bitcoin economy. And I think that's what's missing in order to really get it over to the next level of widespread adoption and really position itself as a viable asset alternative to the US dollar.
Okay, and right now with the new administration expected to be definitely a friend to crypto, and I believe that so far they really have been, as we've seen already, SEC lawsuits dropped and various things that have been favorable to the crypto environment. I mean, so far, are you happy with the progress we've gotten out of the White House, or are you hoping for more of this deregulation and hopefully an easier crypto environment, frankly?
Absolutely. I think the two things that the administration have brought have been very valuable to the digital asset sector. First is obviously they are very friendly to cryptocurrency as a whole, and that's been just great in terms of really helping to foment that sentiment, and that is also what's helping this long-term bullish sentiment in Bitcoin and digital assets as a whole. I think the second factor here is increased regulatory clarity. I think one thing that's been missing in the United States over the past few years is a lack of regulation. So with repealing SAB 121 and a lot of the other measures that are being passed, I think that is a catalyst to really propel digital assets and Bitcoin forward over the next few years. And we're really grateful for that increased playroom to really help enable this.
Yeah, it does seem that at least some of the decisions are legitimizing the space a little bit more maybe than other regulatory decisions have. But you talk about this sort of secondary economy building up through a Bitcoin or other digital asset ecosystem. If you were to kind of game theory this out and think into the future, do you think that takes hold first internationally or here in the U.S.? Or does it kind of come across the board as one just slowly but surely over time?
So historically, what we've seen within digital assets is that all of these instruments find more product market fit outside of the United States, because if you think about it, the number one use case of digital assets and Bitcoin, right, is access to better assets. And one of the most demanded assets outside of the United States is the US dollar. And that is why you see more payments use cases, more tokenization use cases, more lend-borrow use cases for digital assets outside of the United States. So that's what we've seen, and that's probably what's going to happen. But I do think with this increased regulatory clarity, there's a huge chance for institutions as well as builders in Bitcoin and crypto to really take advantage of that and build these businesses in the United States and be able to work with all of these international actors to really spur that adoption forward. However, I do see the emerging markets really leading the way here, as they historically have been, in terms of helping leapfrog that initial digital assets adoption.
Yeah, and I love that, this perspective. And honestly, it's been a while since we've been able to talk about some of these safe havens within the market. And so I think great perspective there, and some definite optimism well needed on, of course, this Tuesday. So we are so thankful. Thank you so much, Alisia Painter, the co-founder and COO of Botanix Labs.